Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we have a lot to cover as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. As you may be aware, the president, Joe Biden, was on Seth Meyers, one of the comedians, television shows last night, saying that there's a potential Gaza ceasefire during Ramadan, but it hinges on the release of hostages. This is late last night on Seth Meyers' show. There's a path forward with difficulty, he said. Now, this is a very rare television interview, and this is more why I start the program with it. You may not have been aware of it. The president revealed that the Israeli government has agreed to a ceasefire during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which begins on Sunday, if the terror group responsible for last October's deadly massacre frees the remaining hostages being held captive in Gaza. Quote, first of all, the hostages being held must be released. Ramadan's coming up, and there has been an agreement by the Israelis that they would not engage in activities during Ramadan as well in order to give us time to get all the hostages out. Now, this is where it gets a little controversial, because he said they also have to take advantage of the opportunity to have peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians who are being used as pawns by Hamas. I think if we get the temporary ceasefire, we're going to be able to move in a direction where we can change the dynamic and have a two-state solution. Not immediately, but a process to get to a two-state solution. The president also said it appears that the Israelis' bombardment of Gaza has slowed down and that Israel has made a commitment to me. They're going to seek to evacuate significant portions of Rafah before they're going to take out the remainder of Hamas. Also, there was, obviously kind of the back and forth between a late night host and the president. And they asked him, Seth Meyers, asked about the president's age and how he overcomes that with voters that are rightfully concerned. And his response was not to focus on himself, but of course to instantly go after Trump. Take a look at the other guy, said Biden. He's about as old as I am. Trump's 4 years younger. It's about how old your ideas are. Look, this is a guy who wants to take us back. All right. So nothing too hard-hitting other than what we're hearing about a potential ceasefire during Ramadan. That's why I want to start the program with that, because you may not have stayed up that late to watch, I can't imagine you would have, the late-night Seth Meyers show that was celebrating 10 years. Shocking. All right, you see the number on the bottom of your screen? Oh, look at this. We're getting some waves, and I wasn't paying attention. Oh, how about this one? Good morning from Sullivan County, PA. Well, good morning, Sullivan County. We appreciate you being along for the ride. We've got a couple of, this is a bad segue on my part. We've got a couple of New York State issues to bring up when we come back. I'm going to try something for the first time on this program and play a clip. It's really from YouTube, so I'm not sure how technically it's going to go, but we're going to hear from our Congressman Nick Langworthy, who released a video yesterday about a topic that I had discussed on yesterday's program as well. We're also going to talk about our friend Joe Semplinsky for a moment, and then we've got a lot about southern border in general. The presidential race today is Michigan's vote. It gets a little tricky, and we'll try, if we have time, to explain what's going on the Republican side, because there's actually two different dates, and that has to do with moving the calendar, and they don't want to get fined by the RNC, and it's kind of a wonky scenario. But this is the state for Biden where there was almost a protest because of his stance on Israel. A large Muslim community there, a Democrat Muslim community, saying that they were going to not vote for him or write in or go for somebody else. So we'll talk about all that and much more. But we do have to take our first break, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. Look at all these waves pouring in this morning. Thank you to everybody reaching out. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking. Last night, kind of late last night, there's a little bit of breaking news here. Congressman Nick Langworthy endorsed Joe Semplinsky for the New York State Assembly. This coming out Just last night, as I said, Joe Semplinsky is running for the 148th district. We mentioned it. Well, let's see. We had him on the program. He announced Friday. We had him on the program Monday morning. It's the district that is currently represented by Joe Giglio, who is retiring. This is what the congressman had to say. I've gotten to know Joe over the years, and he's a man of integrity and principle. He is a proven leader who will fight back against the one-party rule of downstate Democrats whose policies are hurting the southern tier. I know he will hit the ground running and continue the exceptional leadership of my friend, Joe Giglio, and I look forward to our partnership in government. And I know I've said it numerous times, but you saw the job that Joe Semplinsky did when he had just 4 months in Congress, so there's no doubt, to Congressman Langworthy's point, that he will hit the ground running. Joe weighed in on this, saying, I'm tremendously grateful to Congressman Langworthy for his support. As we fight to save New York, Congressman Langworthy has been fighting in Washington to deliver a common sense agenda, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in Albany, where it is desperately needed. We have a lot of work to do to put New York in the right direction, and I'm excited by the opportunity to serve my community again. So that was a welcomed email I received last night. Now, speaking of Congressman Langworthy, I'm going to try this for the first time, and so bear with me, but he released a video yesterday slamming the open borders and the crime policies of Democrats after the tragic Laken Riley murder that I mentioned on the program yesterday, that we went kind of in depth. There's a lot of media coverage on this trying to essentially hide the fact that the accused murderer, alleged murderer, was here illegally. They focused on things like perhaps women shouldn't be running by themselves and jogging. It was very, twisting themselves up into a pretzel to spin a narrative. But the congressman weighed in on this yesterday. Let's see how this goes.
Laken Riley in Georgia was brutally murdered and taken from her family by an illegal immigrant who should have been in jail. Jose Ibarra entered the United States illegally last year when the Biden administration gave him a one-way ticket to New York City. Now, what's absolutely disgusting is that he was arrested in New York City for child endangerment. But then, because of our bail reform laws, he was released back onto the streets. New York City Democrats know damn well that this is a result of their senseless policies. New York's bail reform has shattered lives across New York and now in the state of Georgia. President Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas, they're also responsible for this, and they've allowed absolute lawlessness to occur at our border and across our country. How many American lives will it take for us to close the border? How many violent crimes will it take for democratic cities to end their sanctuary city policies? The blood is on their hands. Laken Riley would still be here if our border was secure. Laken Riley would still be here if this criminal was locked up the first time he committed a crime. It's sickening, and it has got to end now. President Biden has the power to secure the border by executive action, and Governor Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams could end New York sanctuary city policies with the stroke of a pen. As a dad, I'm absolutely heartbroken and outraged for Laken's family. We have a responsibility to ensure that no other family has to go through this tragedy. She's the daughter of the Riley family, but she's a daughter of our whole country because she's an American citizen. She deserves so much better from her government, and we cannot let another moment pass before this border is closed. Mr. President, it is time for you to act. It's time for you to act now.
Thank you so much, Congressman Nick Langworthy, weighing in on what is a major...
My first guest is a good friend.
Hey, you want to watch some Johnny Carson? So what is being said, and it's really, it's very frustrating. Anderson Cooper said something that I think will frustrate you, because you see how often the media and politicians exploit perhaps maybe a gun issue, shooting, to attack Second Amendment rights almost instantly. Now Anderson Cooper doesn't like people maybe quick to judge on this, saying Georgia officials today released grim new details in the killing of nursing student Laken Hope Riley on the University of Georgia campus last Thursday, as if the initial facts were not horrifying enough or the sense of loss not deep enough by now. And all of it has now been compounded by the revelation the suspect was in this country unlawfully and how quickly that fact became politicized. It's interesting when you pick and choose when that outrages you. Democrat Representative Porter, Katie Porter out of California, said the important thing, let me give you the exact quote. Well, I think when a horrible tragedy like this happens, I think whenever we're dealing with violent crime, there's a sense of outrage, of sadness, and of loss. But I think the important thing to focus on is any one instance shouldn't shape our overall immigration policy, which has so many different facets, including economic choices about what workers to allow in, how to create prosperity in America. So the situation is tragic, and it is a loss. And it's important to acknowledge that, but also to recognize how all the other parts of immigration policy fit together. So we're giving you all sides of the coin there. And again, we do want to thank Congressman Langworthy for studying along that video. We have taken a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken, broadcasting live from the Heselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. To Congressman Langworthy's point, this is coming from the New York Post editorial board. And their headline is that the legacy media is shielding Laken Riley's alleged killer, Jose Libera, and his enabler, Joe Biden. That's the headline from the New York Post this morning. Another day, another brutal crime committed by an illegal migrant, and another blind eye turned by the legacy media. The Associated Press conveniently failed to mention in a report on the Georgia murder of nursing student Laken Riley, the suspected killer, Jose Antonio Libera, crossed the U.S. border illegally. Instead, listen to this. The once venerable news outfit chose to make the story about the fears of, quote, solo female athletes and cited recommendation that female runners carry pepper spray or a whistle and run during daylight hours or with a friend. Sliding right up to the edge, very close to the edge of victim shaming, victim blaming. NBC, meanwhile, buried the inconvenient detail of Libera being an illegal migrant way down in the 37th paragraph of a Sunday story on the murder. They go through the history here, and it's a short history, but of the media coverage and all this. But the influx of migrants across the southern U.S. border has been an unmitigated disaster, crushing small towns in the region and big cities around the nation. It's something we've talked about a lot. There's a poll out that shows a record number of Americans view this issue as a critical threat to U.S. interests. We're going to get to that in just a moment, and you'll see a little political pandering because of it, but I'll continue. It's pumped massive wealth into the coffers of narco cartels via human trafficking and fentanyl. And we talked yesterday about that new book out that suggests that fentanyl is in some ways a weapon of mass destruction by China. China has their hand in fentanyl. Continuing. And it takes an intimate human toll with sociopaths like Libera traversing the country looking at random for victims. Laken Riley's blood, and this is from the New York Post editorial board, I'd love to hear your opinion on it, is on Biden's hand and the hands of DHS Chief Mayorkas and every other politician and official nationwide who enabled our border erasure, meaning open, porous borders. That any journalist is running cover for them by minimizing this tragedy is beyond obscene. Yes, they couldn't make it the headline because polls show that this is very harmful to Biden's reelection campaign. That's why you may have heard that he is going to visit the border, I think on Thursday. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let me see my time here. Yeah, we're doing fine. A record high number of Americans see large numbers of illegal immigrants coming into the U.S. as a, quote, critical threat to U.S. interests. This is a new poll that was just released yesterday. The Gallup poll found that 55% of U.S. adults say that, quote, large numbers of immigrants entering the United States illegally are a critical threat to U.S. vital interests. That's up 8% from last year, and higher than the previous high of 50% all the way back in 2004. So we're at 55%, considered a critical threat. Of those polled, 31% said large number of immigrants entering illegally is an important threat, while 14% said it was not important. So if you combine critical threat and important threat, you've got a very, very high numbers that you don't normally see people agreeing on. In the poll, 28% of Americans say immigration is the most important problem facing the U.S. That's sharply higher than in January when the number was 20%, so jumping 8 points. The polling highlights immigration as the most named problem above government, the economy, and inflation. Wow. So there is no surprise here, though it goes to maybe speak a little bit about the president's campaign, for lack of a better word, crisis. He is going to visit the border. Yes, it is. It's on Thursday, according to the Associated Press. Biden will travel to Brownsville, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, an area that often sees large numbers of border crossings. He will meet with border agents and discuss the need for bipartisan legislation. Now, as you're aware, they're trying to, after Swazi's win of George Santos' seat, which we can dive in depth on that if you really wanted to, but they're trying to suggest it was a bellwether. This is exactly how it's going to go in November if people can run like Swazi. But the problem is with him, he ran as a Republican, which is always interesting in an election year how that happens when the Democrat Party may try to show themselves a little more moderate, or in this case, he tried to pin the blame on the border on Republicans. So this is essentially what Biden sees as perhaps a winning strategy for himself, where he could take an opportunity to blame Republicans for not reaching a bipartisan deal, which we know very often bipartisan deal means give in to us on all of our demands, and then we'll consider it bipartisan. Well, the head of the Border Patrol Union said Monday, it's too little, too late. That this is all about optics before the November election. Everything that he does is too little, too late, said Brandon Judge, the president of the National Border Patrol Council. He had 3 years to do what he needed to do to secure the border. He had 3 years to put policies in place. Now we're only 8 months from an election, and now it looks like he's interested. And he's only interested in it because it's self-serving, and he wants to save himself. But the truth of the matter is, yes, he could stop this flow tomorrow. Yes, if you recall at the time, getting rid of that executive order that kept our border secure from the Trump administration was his day number one goal. And I always find that very kind of obnoxious after some point. But the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that. And that's what he did. And then it should come as no surprise that we're dealing with the problem that we're dealing with. And I think to this gentleman's point, too little, too late, it really is. You've had 3 years of this. And it's hard to take it at face value that now there's concern, now that there's care, when it also seems to correlate with what the polls are saying and the major criticism of this administration. Now, this was not to be our only topic for the morning. There was just a few things in a row that I want to bring to you. You can weigh in on all these issues, or if you have something you'd like to have me bring up that you think that we are overlooking on Frankly Speaking, I'd love to hear from you on that as well. But we do have to take a short break, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Our beautiful view there overlooking Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, as I mentioned. We've been talking so much about public safety in this case. That tragic story. What a appropriate time to mention this. Yesterday, if you joined us, we had Elisa Trosha on the program. It's not too late to register for her free women's self-defense class. Yes, it is for women at a time when we talk about public safety so often. There is information up on your screen for just a moment. It's tonight from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m., and it will be hosted, if you will, by professional combat sports athlete Matt Phillips and Sergeant Tom Kimball of the Chemung County Sheriff's Office. It's absolutely free. You see the number there. 607-259-6139 if you have any questions or if you'd like to register. And it is tonight at TriFit Training, 116 Breezeport Road in Horsehead. So I wanted to make sure to promote that one more time before tonight's event. Okay, I forgot to mention this, and I apologize. This should have really been probably during our discussion about Congressman Langworthy and former Congressman and now candidate for Assembly, Joe Sempolinski. But the Democrats are rejecting the bipartisan map and will redraw the New York House districts. Not really coming as a surprise, but there's a lot of people hoping beyond hope this would not be the case. Democrats seized control over drawing New York's congressional districts on Monday, rejecting a map proposed by the state's bipartisan redistricting commission in favor of drafting new lines that could make key swing seats more Democratic. Yes, they're not even hiding what they're necessarily doing at this point. It is because if you haven't been following, the majority in the House could really bank on New York State, certain House races in New York State. So they want to make this as easy Democratic as they can, meaning a Democrat seat, without tipping that whole law about gerrymandering. On a day of high drama inside the state capitol in Albany, party leaders argued that Senate and Assembly had no choice but to reject the commission map in lopsided votes because it improperly split counties, broke up naturally occurring communities, and favored incumbents. You know what's frustrating? I wouldn't say what they came up with was necessarily extra favorable for Republicans. Republicans almost accepted, well, could have been worse. It's not great. Could have been worse. And that was still not far enough. So many people agreed with it, but it was turned down yesterday. But in private conversations, they made little effort to hide their true objective. With the battle for control of the House likely to run through New York this fall, Democrats here and in Washington are determined to use their supermajority, another reason why voting is very important, supermajority in the state legislature, to tilt the playing field against Republicans from Long Island to Syracuse. The exact contours of the replacement districts remain to be seen late Monday. State lawmakers were expected to quickly release a draft of the replacement map in preparation for approval later this week, but discussions stretched into the night. And you know what's interesting about this on many different levels? Look at the numbers of waves we've been getting lately. Thank you so much, everybody. What's interesting about this, petitions actually start today. The petition process starts today. So if you're on a committee or you just want to take out your favorite candidate's petition, if that happens to be, let's say, Langworthy, or depending on where you're viewing from, Tenney, Mark Molinaro, if you're in those districts and you're watching from afar, you don't technically know if you're getting the signature from someone that will be in that person's district a few weeks from now. It's another mess, much like what we saw just a few years ago. Behind closed doors, Democrats were still haggling over a complex set of legal and political concerns. 3 Democrats briefed on the discussions said they were headed toward a middle ground, lines that Democrats hoped would offset Republican gains from a new gerrymander in North Carolina, and that would not run afoul of New York's ban on partisan gerrymandering. I guess what's so frustrating is that all the articles, even though they may be supportive of it, making it more favorable to Democrats, they still admit that the other lines were competitive, that these districts were competitive. And isn't that the ultimate goal, to make them competitive? That it could go for and this is maybe a bad example, but Santos as a Republican winning that seat, and then it goes to a Democrat. Now, that's obviously a very unique case, and we can go through other reasons why that was. But if the emerging plan holds, the most significant changes would come on Long Island, in the Hudson Valley, and around Syracuse. Democrats' proposed changes could endanger a pair of Republican incumbents, Mark Molinaro and Brandon Williams, and help secure a Democratic one, Representative-elect Tom Suozzi, on the North Shore of Long Island. Now, according to, just making sure my time was okay, Jeffrey Weiss, a professor at New York's law school and an expert on the state's redistricting process. Now, that's a niche market. That's an interesting degree to go for. But he said this is just unprecedented, unscripted, unpredictable. Now, the stakes are enormous. Districts tailor-made for Democrats could help the party flip several seats and win back control of the House of Representatives, and that's the ultimate goal. But when Democrats tried to skew the maps in their favor 2 years ago, Republicans sued and won. The State Court of Appeals found Democrats violated a constitutional ban on partisan gerrymandering. So the maps were drawn by a court-appointed special master instead. That fall, Republicans gained 4 seats in New York, helping them win control of the House. But the next round went to Democrats when the Court of Appeals in December ordered that another set of maps be drawn in time for the 2024 election, giving the Democrats who control Albany a second bite at the apple. And that's a very Washington thing to say, by the way. But I don't... It's not even constitutional. But anyway, we don't have to get into kind of relitigate that. But the National Party is looking to New York to help win back a majority in the U.S. House. This is what Weiss had to say. And if that happens, you open the door to the Republicans going back to court and challenging the map all over again, which just leads to possibly more uncertainty this year into the future. Yes, again, election is less than 4 months away. Maps, that meaning primaries and the like. Maps approved by the Bipartisan Independent Redistricting Commission earlier this month made only modest changes to the existing map, but Albany Democrats have the power to effectively overrule the commission, so they are again taking matters into their own hands. We're looking now at a June 25th primary, Weiss said, but with more delay and uncertainty, we could see a primary for Congress in August or September, similar to what happened 2 years ago. Yes, petition season starting today, and we're not even sure what our district maps technically look like. Now, we have another break that I have to take here. We're going to talk about the Michigan primary that is happening. Wow. Keep them coming in, all those nice waves. The Michigan primary is today from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. Local time. But did you know that some of Michigan is in Eastern Standard Time, but there are 4 counties that observe Central Time. So just to make it a little more confusing, make it a little more difficult to stay up and watch the results. We'll talk about that when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, thank you for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. You see that impressive 11 waves so far this morning. Thank you. But if you have any comments you'd like to make about today's topic, who do you think? Well, Nikki Haley is still in, obviously, the race. Do you see, because there's still kind of that mad push by the media suggesting, well, if you look at the numbers, yes, she was easily defeated in South Carolina, her home state, but that still means 40% didn't like the essentially incumbent is a talking point that you may keep hearing in the news. But let me give you kind of the rundown real quick. Polls are open from 7 to 8, as I mentioned. Democrat primary voters can choose from President Biden, Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota, and author Marianne Williamson. Now, Marianne Williamson has since dropped out, but too late, I'm sure. They can also have the option to cast an uncommitted vote. And now that's important because we've seen a push for that in Michigan, trying to send a signal to the Biden administration that the certain faction in the Democrat Party does not like his stance on Israel. Meanwhile, Republican voters on Tuesday will have their choice for former President Trump and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, of course, the only 2 GOP candidates left in the race. The others who have since dropped out will also be on, I guess, the way this reads. But Michigan Democrat-controlled legislature set the state's primary day earlier than usual this year to comply with the wishes of the DNC. But by doing so, the Democrats pushed the Republicans out of compliance with the Republican National Committee. So this is where, I know, sorry, this is where it gets confusing. To avoid a penalty from the RNC, Michigan Republicans came up with a split primary system, which voters can cast their ballots either today or on March the 2nd. On Saturday, the Michigan GOP will hold a party-run convention in Detroit. The winner of that contest could receive up to 39 delegates, although they will be distributed by district. There are 13 total districts and 3 delegates per district. Yeah, they make this very convenient. And it's not just Michigan. I know. It's all a little confusing. You got caucuses, you got primaries, and the dates. Now, CNN tells us what we should watch for. The Michigan primary on Tuesday will not only assess President Biden's strength in a key battleground state, but also serve as a litmus test on the president's refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Biden's ardent support for Israel, whose ongoing military campaign has killed roughly 30,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's Hamas-run Ministry of Health. Okay. This is coming from CNN. Gregory Krieg and Eric Brandner decided, and that's the first time I was reading it. I didn't mean to get that far into the article. I wanted to give you the takeaways, but I just want to repeat what that just said. Biden's ardent support for Israel, whose ongoing military campaign has killed roughly 30,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's Hamas-run Ministry of Health. Okay. That goes as reporting today. Receiving propaganda numbers from Hamas. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. That's not why I brought this up. It has enraged a large block of American progressives, many of them Jewish and Arab Americans, most notably in and around the Michigan city of Dearborn, home to one of the largest Arab American communities in the U.S. The anger is fueling a statewide movement among Democratic critics of Israel for voters to mark uncommitted on their ballots. Though Biden won the state in 2020 by about 150,000 votes, the victory margin was much narrower in 2016 when Trump defeated Hillary by nearly 11,000. The group leading the protest campaign has said it hopes to garner at least that many uncommitted votes on Tuesday. Why? Well, the goal is to send a message to the Biden campaign about the domestic political costs of his stance on a conflict increasingly referred to by critics as a genocide. And we heard that from Van Jones, where younger people, because there is that strain of kind of anti-Israel sentiment in the Democrat Party, calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe. This is not an anti-Biden campaign, said the leader of the Listen to Michigan campaign, Layla Elabad. It's a humanitarian vote. It's a protest vote. It is a vote that tells Biden and his administration that we believe in saving lives. Now, on the Republican side, Trump and Haley will begin to go head-to-head in the first part of the state's GOP nomination process, which begins with Tuesday's vote and continues with 39 of the state's Republicans, 55 delegates up for grabs at a state convention this weekend. It is the first GOP primary vote in a state that Biden flipped in 2020. Now, what CNN asked are the takeaways, if you will. The first ballot test of Biden's Israel strategy. Just how committed are Michigan Democrats to Biden? Tuesday will tell. I'm not going to go through that anymore because you saw where this article's mind is at. Let's take a break. So I want to talk about this and get your opinion on it. They ask, what's Haley's magic number? And this has been a constant theme, and it's something I brought up on the program before South Carolina on Saturday. That one thing I think Republicans have a bad habit of doing is saying, well, Trump or whoever, we'll just use it now in today's terms, Trump is going to win by 40. Well, say 20, and then if we win by 20, it's still a huge win. You know, I'm not sure why you say 40. So then the media can run with, well, didn't get the numbers that they hoped. Haley outperformed, those type of things. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. Thank you for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. So CNN asks in Michigan today, what is Haley's magic number? Now, here's the issue with that. Is there a magic number at this point? I mean, she has not won. Donald Trump has won every state thus far. So I guess I'm just kind of almost confused by the question. Haley acknowledged after losing by about 20 points in South Carolina, her home state, on Saturday, that 40% of the vote, roughly what she received in her home state, is not the necessary 50% or more. She needs to upend the Republican presidential primary. But she also noted 4 out of 10 is no tiny group. And there are, quote, huge number of voters in our Republican primaries who are saying they want an alternative to Trump. I don't know. I find conversations like this difficult because she hasn't won a state. So you can make that argument. I just don't understand the end game. You can make that argument because she said technically, this was yesterday, technically he cannot win in her mind. So, I mean, I guess what are you proposing? You're just trying to kind of bloody up the Republican Party going into November? Or do you think you can turn it around by Super Tuesday? And I guess what's the end game? You just had the Koch organization back out from giving you any money. It just seems like not a last grasp necessarily, but it kind of scorched earth on your way out for I can't see the reason. Especially as someone as young as Hallie, who has a bright future in the Republican Party, it seems as if that may not have been important to her, or she's just seeing maybe an opportunity to be the, maybe she's thinking no labels. That came up the other day. I'm not sure. Whether it's a huge number of, or simply a well-funded but effectively defeated minority, is a question going forward. So far, it appears to be the latter. But an expectations-defining performance by Hallie in Michigan, a state at the center of the former president's path back to the White House, could nudge the narrative back in her direction ahead of Super Tuesday. So what they're saying, they're laying the groundwork. If she has a good day or a better than expected day, it could give her momentum going into Super Tuesday on March the 5th. Those contests will dole out more than a third of the delegates in a GOP primary that Trump has so far dominated, sweeping the early voting states. Hallie is unlikely, no matter how she does, to pick up many in Michigan, where most will be won at a caucus-style state convention this weekend. And I don't know, we probably don't need to go through all this, but the kind of the fractured and confusing GOP process. We mentioned it a little bit. I think you get the point of it. It's kind of a mess. And finally, it's a test for Biden and Trump in a key state. There you are. We'll be watching, and of course, tomorrow on the program, we'll have as many updates as we possibly can for you as we move along in that. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Biden and that kind of protest vote against him for his stance on Israel. We'll see if there's any legs there or if that was just a lot of media hype. Time will tell. We got to take another break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. I know we got to start moving along quickly as the show is wrapping up, but it's not too late to get waves in or make any comments. According to a new poll, nearly half of Democrats want to boot Joe Biden off the ticket. And who do you think the favorite is to replace him? I know we've got a story similar to this just a few weeks ago. Almost half of Democrats want someone besides President Biden at the top of their party's 2024 ticket. And former First Lady Michelle Obama is a leading choice to replace him. About 48% of the Democrat voters polled said they approve of the party, quote, finding another candidate to replace Joe Biden before the election in November, compared to 38% who disapprove. So 38% said, hey, don't mess with this. Don't change horses midstream. 48% said, no, it's time to get rid of Biden, which it was kind of time. If you're serious about this, this is late in the system. This is coming from Rasmussen, by the way. But only 33%, only 33% of Democrats believe a ballot shakeup is likely to happen. The pollster found little consensus among likely Democrat voters as to who should replace Biden on the ballot if he does decide not to seek re-election. Michelle Obama led the group, receiving 20% support among a list of options that also included Vice President Harris, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, none of the above, and not sure. Most Democrats, 27%, selected none of the above, so receiving about 7% more in that vote than Michelle Obama. 27% selecting none of the above. Coming in behind the former First Lady was the Vice President. Oh, interesting. With 15% of Democrats indicating they would back Harris, jumping to the top of the ticket. 12% of Democrats said they would like to see a possible rematch of Clinton-Trump. 12% going for Clinton. And Newsom, who's been running kind of a shadow campaign, only receiving 11. That's got to hurt. Now, going back to September, Ted Cruz had suggested that Obama could be, quote, parachuted in at the Democrat National Convention, which will be in the former First Lady's hometown of Chicago, and name the party's nominee for president in place of Biden. All right. Oh, you know what? I'm going to take a break because there's a really good piece as we head out the door. Biden is targeting, this is his new villain. We saw it around the Super Bowl, shrinkflation. You know, when you get that food and there's less in the box or the package is smaller, but it's the same price. So that's, I guess, in addition to the success of Bidenomics. Not sure. Let's take our last break, then we're going to wrap things up on Frankly Speaking. Don't go anywhere. May get a little bit noisy out there. We got a fire truck a few doors down. We'll try to keep you updated. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. As we wrap up today's discussion, there's a piece at the New York Post editorial board that says Biden's student loan bailouts are a gift to the privileged few and everyone else should pay. So it's actually a really interesting piece by the Post because it really shows, listen to these numbers if we have time, we do. The administration released, it kind of got cocky for lack of a better term, saying that the Supreme Court can't stop me, if you recall Biden saying that. Well, the administration released a breakdown of how many people score from this latest move. So $1.2 billion being erased and a little under 153,000, meaning 0.04% of Americans. If you look at just New York, us in New York in general, 8,190 or 0.09% of the state's population got $63 million erased. Have so few ever benefited so much from one government giveaway? And the argument that's relief for the working class is largely Americans who never graduated college, who earn about 1.5 million less in their lifetimes on average than college grads, yet still see their taxes going to pay for Biden's giveaway, as do college grads who paid their own loans or chose an affordable school and are saved enough to take on any debt. This is anything but fair, says the New York Post editorial board. But we are out of time. There's a couple other things. Oh, quick update. The CBS News, they have returned the confidential files of the reporter that we brought to you last week. CBS News on Monday finally returned confidential files belonging to fired investigative reporter Catherine Heritage. We mentioned her because she was the only one really reporting on the Hunter Biden situation and getting pushback for doing so. Her personal files, along with her work laptop, which may have contained other confidential info, were immediately confiscated and locked away at the CBS News office. As we mentioned, her union representative went to pick up the material this morning, meaning yesterday morning. And it's being reported that a hazmat unit had to respond to Donald Trump Jr.'s home after he received a death threat with white powder in the envelope. So those are our quick last-minute things at the end of the program. Well, have a great day, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow morning with Frankly Speaking. We'll try to go over as much as we can about Michigan. We'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure, as we did this morning. Again, thank you for all the waves. Thank you for all the comments. And we will be back tomorrow morning, starting at 7 with Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We'll be broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio tomorrow morning. I look forward to it already. See you then.